Hello and welcome to PM Personality Profile. My name is Nana Ansakwa IV, probably the only chief within the Republic who owns his own republic, the Republic of Edumasa, the little Republic of Edumasa. I'm sure you know that by now. There are some interviews, and as you're driving to, you're wondering, I hope I had series. I could do, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. Because the individual you're going to interview have so much stories to share. And as an interviewer, you're asking yourself, which of the stories do I leave out? Which ones do I summarize and which one do I highlight? Because I always tell you, the whole idea of personality profile is to share a story, people's defining moment. Those that we learn to shy away from and those that we learn to copy to make ourselves better. So you're looking at somebody who's a media, politics, diplomat, writer, advocate, and you're wondering, which part of all these stories do I leave out? Well, whichever way and however I ponder, I still have an hour. And I will make sure that within that hour, we make the best out of it. When I come back, I'm talking to His Excellency, Alhaji, Haruna, Attah. Don't go away, I'm coming back. Well, thank you very much. I'm sure this is the part we are all anxious and waiting for when the conversation begins. Believe you me, it's the same for me. Your Excellency, Alhaji, Haruna, I don't even know how to refer to you, but I am glad and I'm honored and thank you very much for this opportunity.
Nana, it's my honor more than yours. First of all, it's not easy just sitting in front of a traditional ruler.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm honored that you've come to my own house. Unfortunately, we didn't do the proper amanier that I should have brought a few schnapps and whatever. But I'm sure you pardon me for that. I'll pardon me for that, Nana.
I'll pardon you. Alhaji, if you were to start all over again, Navosek, tech, and everything, would you do it again, or would you have done it differently? Advocate, championing the right, fighting for the cause of nationalism. Would you do it all over again?
This is a highly philosophical question. You wish you could determine your future or your life plan, but as you grow, your life follows its own path, determined for it, either by destiny, by the creator, by yourself, whatever. But you don't get to know what you want to do till you've gotten there. But to answer your question, I'll say there are certain things I would wish I wouldn't do. And there are other things too, really, I cherish and will do over and over again. For example, I went to prison as a media person. Did I enjoy prison? Of course not. No, can't enjoy prison. But then did I enjoy the process that took me there, working as a journalist? Yes, I enjoyed that. So you see the two sides I'm trying to present. It isn't nice for you to have handcuffs on your wrists from morning to evening. By the time the handcuffs were removed, my wrists were all blistered. Wow. That isn't a pleasant thing. You won't want it repeated in your life. No. But then, if it's to do the work of a media person, a journalist, it's something I've enjoyed, and I will do it again if I got the chance.
Great. Now, I'm going all the way back because, I've heard you say that if Ghana were, states or federal states, you would have held an Ashanti passport.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've said it over and over again. If Nana Otumfuo Osei Tutu is listening, he's my king because I was born in his kingdom. I was actually born in Kumasi, and my father took advantage of the Declaration of Independence and moved us to the north. He's one of the early educated generation Northerners who were educated. So he took advantage and moved us to the north, first to Yendi and then later to Tamale. but then I'm a Kumasi born, and so I'm an Ashanti national. So I always bow to my Ashanti ancestry, as I would say. Yeah.
Did you live, so did you start schooling in the north and everything then?
Yes, in the north. I mean, I was a toddler when we moved. Independence was in 57. I was born in 52. So when we got to the north, I think we got to the north either late 57 or early 58. It's receding in my memory. But I do remember I started primary 1 in Yendi. And then later when we moved to Tamale, then I continued at primary 4. And then in those days we had middle schools. Then middle school, then common entrance, then to Navrongo Secondary, then to the University of Science and Technology, then now Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology.
Wow. Did you ever travel south on holiday, or you stayed all the way until Tech?
Oh, I did travel many times down south, because the bulk of my relations were and are still in Kumasi.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and here in Accra, Newtown, one of my father's siblings lived here in Accra. And then also, also Kumasi, it was just my family base. So one used to travel on holidays. And indeed, when I got to Form 5, that was the first time I traveled down to Accra itself, but not to Kumasi. I just finished my O-levels, and funnily enough, I wanted to go into the military. And my in-law was an army officer, so he was trying to help me to get through it and go to the academy. But even he couldn't help, because I was poor at mathematics and I got a 9. And so that wouldn't qualify me for academic.
I was even thinking of mathematics. You look so gentle. I wonder if you can shoot somebody.
Well, I wonder myself. You see, when you think of some of these professions, you think of them with a peacetime in your mind, because the military had become, well, another job. Army officers growing fat, soldiers all over the place. And so it was fashionable. Young people wanted to go into the military. And after the coup of 66 and also the coup of 72, the military became an attractive place for people to go to, because they got the top jobs. They were the lords and masters. So it was fashionable for young men to want to be army officers. So, well, maybe I wanted to be a soldier. I probably would have been a general by now or something.
General Haruna.
if one of those coups hadn't swallowed me, or if I hadn't been tempted at one stage to stage a coup or the other, that could have bumped me off. But those are some of the interesting things about one's growing up. So luckily, they just advised my in-law to tell me, to break it to me as softly as possible, that without mathematics, I'll have no place in the academy. But well, it ended well, because then I got into sixth form. And I went to the Faculty of Art, where I studied graphic design. Yep. So actually, that's my training. And that's what gave me my interest in the media in general, because the course in graphic design is an all-inclusive course, not just designing images, but coming up with lines for the images you design, whether to advertise something, whether to promote one thing or the other. And it was a 4-year degree course, but we had to do 3 years of English.
3? At
the Faculty of Art. And if you failed, they would send you home. So we all had to do English for 3 years. So well, I was doing English at Legon, for example, for 3 years, I could have then gotten my degree in English after the 3 years. Yeah, but anyway, it was not a subject that we took to the degree. It ended in the 3rd year. So that's how come I developed my interest in the media, because as a graphic design student, you studied photography, drawing, calligraphy, and all those things, film and that. So you grew up with your mind actually tuned in for media work. So it was not difficult for me when, after graduation, I got my national service at the then Ghana Film Industries Corporation.
Okay.
Yeah. So my life started from there, as it were. Yep.
But then obviously you then fell more for the literacy side than the design side.
Indeed, indeed, you are absolutely right. I'm stronger. I'm stronger. I was a poor to mediocre graphic designer, but certainly much more accomplished in the use of words, in language, in writing. So as I also continued in my trajectory towards what I would become, I discovered that I would do well with writing. So when the newspaper licensing law, and as you can see, I am leaving out a whole chunk of my experience from Ghana Films, which is an entirely different story. And it's an intriguing story, but if we are to dwell on it, like you said, you'll need about 4 more hours. Yeah. So when I fast track, then when the newspaper licensing law was repealed, and then that was in 1992, yeah, and newspapers and other media sources started sprouting all over the place, I found myself contributing a column to the Statesman. Yeah. Now, later I ended up editing it. Then after that, I left and established my own newspaper called the Accra Mail.
Let me you see, you have a very calm demeanor. So, I mean, where do you get that boldness to come up with those punchy stories? That, look, this story is going to go up. It's as if somebody wrote you and said, "Oh yeah, you go publish it." You know,
it's a difficult question. There is the story of a British filmmaker, documentary filmmaker. I forget his name, who did very powerful documentaries during the Second World War to ginger the British public. And like we were saying, he was a gentle soul, and you could not just imagine where the power would come. But it happens. It really happens that sometimes your facial or your physical appearance belies the timbre of your real nature. I've often wondered myself, because there was a time when I was like the only journalist. In fact, at the time I was the only journalist who was constantly backing at the then chairman of the PNDC, no, President Rawlings. When he became president, I did a weekly column called Taking Issue, and I would back at him almost every week, and people would say, "But aren't you afraid? Won't they do this and that to you?" Later, I got a death threat. Obviously, I'm not claiming it was from him, but the late Colonel Kwashiga, came to my house one evening and said to me, "Well, there's a list for people to be like dealt with, finished with." But he told me that he, as a soldier, he's preparing, but he thought I should know. They've seen a list and my name was on it. Wow. Initially, I felt a little frightened, but after an hour or so, I just dismissed it. It's more like, well, if it's just a question of dying, we'll all die. So I dismissed it. But then I did the story in the Statesman then, and then some investigation was done and it just fizzled out. Wow. So you do come across such things. It's frightening, I must say. Yeah.
In Kwame Nkrumah University then, I mean, were you the Che Guevara, that, Cuban, that revolutionaries, that socialists? I mean, were you from, that?
Yeah, let's say I was active, because at a very young age, 20-something, I became, I think, the youngest JCRC president around. I was the president of Unity Hall. And, you know, at that time, Unity Hall had about 400 students. And it was considered the biggest hall in the country. And we even had extra rooms. These days that they are packing these young kids into rooms. We had extra rooms on campus. And I remember changing rooms even 2 or 3 times, because they were from the 2nd floor to the 8th floor to somewhere else.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was really active in that kind of area, but I don't think I was active in a radical sort of way. Of course, the occasional alutes, we all joined them, got beaten. I can still remember one
Marxist?
of the... Which one?
A bit of a Marxist then?
Yes, I would say, look, when you are growing up, those are very attractive, that you want equality, yeah, the rich are cheating the poor, and you want to bring everything to a level where all human beings can enjoy the fruits of their labor. Yeah, you do go through that, you do go through that, but really, when you grow up, then you start seeing the reality of things, and then you move on. But we all toyed with it, really. We all toyed with such socialistic and Marxist things. And some of my friends grew up to be very consistent Marxists and socialists. They still are, several years down the road. I have, well, moved on. I have moved on. So Nana, I would say I was active, but not radical.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
So Statesman, started writing columns, then editing the paper. Then you moved to the Accra, your own paper, the Accra Mail.
The Mail, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
How was it like running the Accra Mail?
It was difficult. Media practice, as you know, in Ghana, it's a very difficult thing. Doing the Accra Mail was such a nightmare for me, basically because the Ghanaian public had been brought up on a diet of bloody-minded journalism. I say bloody-minded journalism because if you don't do something, especially print journalism, if you don't come up with racy headlines, if you don't come up with what the vendors will tell you, newspaper no nyeshi, you are not selling. So you do a very good story, whether it's on the environment, whether it's on child abuse, but once it isn't hot, they don't sell it, so you keep losing money. There's nothing more heartbreaking than your returns come and you realize you've hardly sold anything because the vendors determine that your newspaper is not hot enough for them to even display.
Wow.
They've told me a few times, no, paper no nyeshi. They've many times. And I said, Enyeshi, what do you expect me to do? So they want the kind of media, the kind of journalism that hits from beneath the belt. Yeah. But when I started the Accra Mail, I wanted to move from there. I wanted it to be even Accra-centered because at that time I had argued that our national capital did not have a newspaper that looked into it as an entity, its problems, its potentials. Wow. That's why I established the Accra Mail. So I didn't want to do politics. But then the market just said no. And that's why you'll be surprised. Even highly educated people would tell you, oh, Haruna, also today your paper wasn't hard-hitting. So it's developed a certain pugnacious journalism in Ghana today that Ghanaian journalism is more what you can expose, not what you can promote. I don't know, maybe I'm being rhetorical.
No,
So the celebrated journalist is the one who can expose. But I believe that the basis of good journalism still remains writing. For me, a good writer is a better journalist than someone who just finds out things and puts out there. I would rather read a well-written article, a column, an assessment, an analysis, than just someone who puts out something he has exposed. And then also, paradoxically, and it's a paradox because we are supposed to do it, but then it also affects us. That watchdog tag they've put on us, or put on ourselves, or even the Constitution has put on us, also limits us. We are not watchdogs. We keep journals. That's what journalism is about, for heaven's sake. I'm not anybody's watchdog. I'm there to do a good newspaper, good journalism. If it is about writing a gutter, a story on a gutter, a choked gutter, and I got to find out why the gutter is choked, and it's because a member of parliament is not doing his work. It's part of the story I will tell, but I'll tell it well and write it well. But the gutter itself gives me the inspiration, if you get my point. It gives me the inspiration to do the story. So it is a story you do. As you can see, I'm talking passionately about this. I know many people, or some people, will disagree with me, you see, but I agree a lot with Joseph Pulitzer when he was setting up, or doing a paper for the setting up of the Columbia School of Journalism, who had said that journalism should grow and have, in quotes, the respectability of doctors, accountants, lawyers, and so on. So he wanted journalism to be at that level. And then later,
Let me
go
take
on.
it.
Yeah,
Let me take a break here because I'm really, I think you've opened a can of worms that all of us in the media should pay attention to, because our love to condemn and our rush to enjoy condemnation stories seems to be taking over everything.
Yeah.
And we don't want to promote anything or educate. We just, who are we going to condemn today?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Diabol, as we call it.
Yeah.
Coming straight back on that. Talking to His Excellency Alhaji Haruna Attah. No stranger to Ghanaian fraternity at all. He's been there, he's done that, he's paid his dues. But just before the break, you know, Alhaji, what you said, I think really as a journalist or as somebody playing the media field, really, I think I've always been concerned about it, but I've never known how to put it. And it's that our love for diabolic stories has even gone down to the vendor who's even selling the paper to say, no, today it's not diabolic enough.
The vendors, I know some editors who were consulting vendors on what headline to cast.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, but having said this, I'm not discounting the importance of genuine investigative journalism. Investigative journalism can take years to arrive at a story, but normally it is well written and presented as a story, as a well-written story. I look up to such things. I find such things worthwhile. You all remember Woodward and Bernstein and Watergate. It was an investigative story. It went all the way until it brought down a president. So I'm not discounting that at all. I'm just saying that we are not allowing journalism to flourish as it is, which is mainly really writing and writing well. If you are researching, you research and research well, and then it all makes a difference. But if we are just going to be bloody-minded because we become heroes, because we've exposed this or that person, usually for political reasons, then I'm sure we are not doing our job well. And why are we even discussing the media and not medicine and not architecture and not whatever? Because they are, after all, also professions. But media practice has one major leverage above all of them. That one takes its source from a fundamental human right, the freedom of speech and the freedom of expression. That is what gives us our power as media people, not because we are any special. Any person who goes about thinking because he's a journalist. So as I was saying, for some media people to think that it's because we are special people, it's wrong, and therefore we can behave in just about any way we want to. It's also the power we are wielding. It's not ours. It's for human beings. It's contained in the UN Declaration on Human Rights. It's contained in many liberal constitutions all over the world, and it's contained in ours. So we take our authority and source from a fundamental human right. So that is why I believe that we should therefore exercise it with a lot of circumspection, with a lot of respect, because it's not our power. Mm-hmm. It's not our power. Architects don't go talking, writing about people. Doctors don't go writing about issues and so on. But we do, because we're in a profession that is hinged on the freedom of expression and on the freedom of speech. So in theory and in practice, actually, you don't even need to be called a journalist to practice journalism. Mm-hmm. Provided you have something to say, you can say it verbally, you can write it, you can broadcast it, you have that freedom because of that fundamental freedom that controls us. So I believe that there is a very big responsibility on us to also tamper, as it were, is it tamper or temper, whatever, our activities with that thing behind our mind so that we can serve society better.
Is this the spirit that you fought the Achampong regime with?
Yes, basically, I would say that's what... you mean me individually?
Well, maybe well, I was collective then, you and your cronies.
Yes, yes, the student body in the 70s, of which I was a part of, we had a certain high sense of justice, and we thought the Achampong military government, which the student population had supported initially, we thought over time it had overstayed its welcome and it had become corrupt, and the military had seeped too much into civilian affairs. And so really we had to stand up and be counted, because then the military had become too powerful in Ghana. And that's how it should be, because when they do the coup d'etats, they find fault with the civilian administration. And so they have to bring their people, and everything is militaristic. So yes, that was the kind of spirit we approached our relationship with the military government.
So Achampong left, let the blood flow came, that, you know, received a lot of support. It came back and then everybody thought, no, it's a bit too much. And so then, you know, the fight was on there again to say, look, let's go back to civilian rule and the culture of silence should be broken. Again, you were in there.
Yeah, yeah.
But that was a bit more scarier than the Achampong area, or?
Yes, it was indeed. Oh, we came from June 4th, which saw the execution of about 8 or so former military bosses, and then into the 31st December revolution, which also did see a certain degree of executions of criminals, that kind of thing. So those were scary periods. But then we persisted. By saying we Ghanaians, we persisted and insisted that civil rule or civilian rule was a much more acceptable proposition than continued military rule. So eventual good sense prevailed, and today we are here and, as they say, enjoying these freedoms and talking as freely as we can. But it's, if you add it all up, it's been an exciting period because, like I said, I was born during the time of British colonialism. When I was born, I think the Queen was our head of state. Then moved to Kwame Nkrumah, the first school, and so on and so forth. So looking back, one would say we've had exciting moments. But what we missed, even in the First Republic, is creativity, innovation, and productivity. Unfortunately, these three elements of development and progress haven't seeped into us. Even not yet. As we speak, we are not playing up our creative people. We're not playing up our innovative people. And we're not playing up our productive people. So it's dragging us down. Partisan politics, for example, the kind of partisan politics we see right now, kills initiative, kills creativity, kills innovation, and kills productivity. I'll give you an example. As you know, I was a High Commissioner of Ghana to Namibia and Botswana, and after the elections, we were called back, we came home. As I sit doing this interview with you, do you know that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs hasn't called me for a debriefing?
So they don't know what you were pursuing, what you've left, what we can follow?
I haven't been debriefed. I haven't gone to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to be debriefed. And I learned from my other colleagues that we just got home and all that we saw weeks later was a newspaper statement that we should all return our diplomatic passports, as if that is the issue. What is a diplomatic passport? That is not the issue. So you go and you serve your country and you come back, but because of partisanship, you are treated almost as if you are a criminal, because it's as if when you keep that diplomatic passport, you would use it to do some criminal or unacceptable activity. But is that more important than debriefing me? Because I didn't go there with my own money. I went there with Ghana money, the money of you, all of us. It was the taxpayer money that paid for my comfortable residence. It was the taxpayer money that put me in that Mercedes-Benz with the flag. It was the taxpayer money that got me the house conveniences and so on. So when you come back from serving, no matter which government it is that sends you, when you come back, you owe it to the people to be debriefed. I didn't go, like I'm saying, I didn't go with my money. I couldn't afford to pay myself.
Could it be, well, could it be? I mean, I think it's something that we are seriously missing out on.
Indeed.
Because I've never ever heard any media circles where we are demanding accountability for any ambassador anywhere, or even asking how much trade did you facilitate, or what did you do? I've never, you see, I think the diplomatic world is insulated. They're on their own.
Yeah,
I mean, listening to you now, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. But that aspect of our polity, as it were, is one major important aspect. Not just the kinds of funds that go into it. Because all our missions, we don't send them CDs, we send them dollars. So, or rand, or euro, or whatever. So the foreign ministry is a major guzzling ministry of foreign exchange. And so we should show more interest. Like you are saying, surprisingly for me, the media hasn't shown interest there. So what are some of the bilateral issues involved in our relationships? What are the multilateral organizations we belong to? And what are we getting from them? What are some of the countries that mean more to us than others, and so on? These all form part of the mix of a country's foreign policy. And it should be of interest to the people. And it should be of interest to the media. But it is not. It's one, like we are saying, insulated thing.
The
And it should be
Minister
redressed.
of Roads.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
chasing the Minister
Yeah.
of Roads.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
But it should be redressed. It should be redressed. This is not to bring down the foreign ministry. It's actually one of the most important ministries. So that one, that's why I'm making this point. It is such an important ministry. And by the way, it has some of the best trained civil servants also. Yeah. The foreign ministry has top trained civil servants. So it's a ministry that is doing so much and that could do more and therefore could come rightly to the notice of the public because the public is paying for it.
Now you were heading Nairobi and Botswana. So you are one person that we shouldn't have left alone at all because I mean Kenya, Botswana,
Namibia rather.
Namibia, Botswana. You know, there's so much that we have to pick from each other, particularly Botswana.
Yeah.
You know, because they are doing quite well with, you know, fairly little. Yeah. And so you are somebody that the media shouldn't have left alone at all. We need to debrief and find out what it is we could copy from them.
It's true. I even prefer Namibia in this question you are asking because it's a big country in terms of land mass, but in terms of population, fairly small. But they are so disciplined, something Ghana could do a lot of, or a lot with. As a country, they respect all the rules. Traffic, because some of the things you'd use to determine whether a country is moving or not are the small, small things that we either respect or we treat with contempt. Traffic rules and regulations, they are small, but then running through the red light with impunity, which we do.
Driving on the side.
Driving on the side. Motorbicycles, not knowing that they are also supposed to stop at traffic lights, all of these things, and all these needless accidents. Just a few days ago, what happened in Kintampo is painful. I pray for their souls. But it's all to do with the mix of indiscipline on our roads. So the carnage keeps piling up. The carnage keeps piling up because we do not even respect those simple rules. In Namibia, yeah, they also have accidents, but maybe it's because their roads are so good, they overspeed. But then within the city of Windhoek, for example, you would see so much respect for the rules. It's neat. It used to be the neatest city in Africa. You won't see litter here. Wow. You won't see open drains.
How have they achieved it? Is it through education or through enforcement?
All, and through history, because they are original colonizers who were Germans, and I think they left them the ethos. I think they left them the ethos, and so when they gained independence 29 years ago, I think they maintained some of those things. Yeah, so they are very disciplined. Kigali is another city that you want to go because of its discipline, its neatness. In fact, it recently took over the top position from Windhoek as the neatest city in Africa. So that's something those of us who serve as diplomats can bring to bear on our country. Because you've been there. You've seen how some are doing it. You should still come back and be part of the core of resources that can be called upon any time to help with this or that idea to help the progress of your country. So you go, you come back, nobody wants to talk to you. All your experience, you sit down at home, you eat fufu or kenke with it and leave it there. But it shouldn't be. Wow. People who serve as ambassadors, high commissioners, and in the UN and other multilateral organizations must be part of the developmental mix, as it were. The cauldron we put all these personnel in to help us move on. But like I said, I enjoyed myself as High Commissioner because I served my country to the best of my knowledge. And
where would you get the most culture shock, Botswana or Namibia? Where did you get your most culture shock? As in something they did which you thought, whoa.
both countries, actually. They are a great cattle economy.
Okay.
I used to laugh at my friends there that you have more cows than human beings. And they both have such top meat packing factories. Top, really. And they export to Europe, America, and so on. So the first day I went as an ambassador to pay a courtesy call on the managing director of the meat marketing company of Namibia, and they took me around the factory. What kept hitting me was, so what happened to us? The Bulgar meat factory. It just kept hitting me. So what happened? Because we probably had
Long
that
before
years
this.
ago. I said, the Bulgar meat factory. So that kept hitting me. That was a culture shock, really. And then when I went to Botswana also to present my credentials, and I was taken, I went to their meat marketing company too, and it is European standard. Wow. Because they are exporting to Europe. If it doesn't have that standard, or those standards, they won't buy their meat. So, good question. That was for me a culture shock. Wow. And I kept asking, but we had the Bulgar meat factory.
Are theirs also state-owned? Or
Yeah.
State-owned?
Yeah, but well run.
Wow.
Really well run.
Because that's where we struggle.
Yeah.
If something is state-owned, we seem to struggle with it.
Oh, they have a lot of state-owned things that work. A lot of state-owned things. Because when the Botswanans decided to refine or polish their diamonds in Gaborone, it was the state that took the lead. So now they polish their diamonds in Gaborone. I went to the factory. Wow. And saw it. When President Mahama came on a state visit, we went there, he saw it. And in fact, we went to the meat packing factory, he saw it. And that was a discussion one would have with him in private to revive our agro-based industries. And there are African experiences that we can use.
Taking another break here, and then when I come back, one difficult question. Now here is a statesman who's fighting for the fundamental human rights for you and I to sit and become journalists and do whatever we are. But then he's fighting his own brother-in-law. So I mean, how does that work? I mean, when you come home, would wifey say, look, go easy on my brother-in-law? Wife say, well, you are the journalist, go ahead and do it. Don't go away, we are coming back. For staying, and I'm sure if you were listening before the break, you've gotten all your ears cleaned up, because I'm just trying to find out, how do you fight your brother-in-law, you know, so fiercely and so harsh, you know, and still maintain a brother-in-law relationship? So what would wifey say? Look, you're writing too much about my sister's husband, calm down. How do you deal with this situation? This is a family business.
It is a rather complex issue, honestly, if you look at it. But then we've gotten over it.
For those who don't know, you know, Haruna is married to Mrs. Rollins' sister. Mrs. Rollins is obviously married to, you know, the J.J. Rollins, who Haruna is fighting against for the system. So this is a Thursday theater business.
Let's say I used to, we've made up.
Yes.
And we've since grown up. When I was High Commissioner in Namibia, he paid a visit. The Namibian authorities invited him to give a keynote lecture. And as a former head of state, he was entitled to all the protocols of our head of state. So I had to go to the airport to meet him, take him to his hotel, and then on the day of the lecture, I had to, as it were, help chaperone him in. So he's loved in Namibia. He's really loved. You see, sometimes also no investigations, no right to speak. Jerry Rawlings is very popular outside, not because of just his so-called charismatic personality, but he did some good stuff because he was one of the African leaders who stood up for Namibia when the South Africans were trying to take Walvis Bay away from them around the independence, their independence. So he's highly respected there. He's really highly respected. So the
I mean, how was the first meeting? Because there's a man who, you know, has sort of, you know, stood up against me for a long time. But now he's the ambassador there. I'm coming.
But Jerry Rawlings, sorry, former President Rawlings, is a very interesting character. As I grew up, I got to understand his character more. And I'm also something of a streetwise kid. So I didn't know how to break it. So as I was walking to the plane to welcome him, I was saying, what if he decides not even to accept my handshake? Which he could do, or to say something. So I quickly had an inspiration. I know he speaks Hausa.
He does?
Or he understands.
Okay.
So I went to him at the, what is it they call, when you come down,
the
gangway.
Yeah.
And I said to him, Sanda Suami Gida. And he looked at me, Sandukade. so it broke,
it broke the eyes.
It broke the eyes. It broke the eyes. So then I ushered him in. And later in his hotel, I also said something which again impressed him and broke the ice more. So when we had settled him, so I said to him, Your Excellency, I will leave you to depressurize, and then we'll come back later. And it's an air, what is it, a flying language, to depressurize. A pilot will know what that means. So for me to tell a former Air Force pilot that I'm leaving him to depressurize, to rest, it impressed him. So he turned and looked at me and said, depressurize, yes. And then, so he has, I think he has a side which you should know, and then you can tweak it. I don't think many people know that side. So he...
But were there instances where, you know, your wife would say, look, go easy on the story?
No, she's an amazing person, like her sister. If her sister was siding with her husband, she also was siding with her husband, right or wrong. So that's how we kept. But like I said, so actually, so that's it. But we have since grown up. We've moved on. We've patched up. Nana Kunedu often comes here, and so on. Nanaya and herself talk every now and then. So I think that is now history that we can relate and laugh and get amused. And then also a lesson for people listening that you can't carry a grudge forever. At a certain stage, you have to leave grudges and move on, especially when the children are growing and the grandchildren are coming. So I think it's a lesson.
I can't leave this interview without talking about autoimmune diseases. And congratulate Mrs. Haruna Attah for not sitting at home, you know, throwing pity parties and expecting sympathies from all over the world, but going out there and championing the cause, and also for you to standing strong behind her to champion it. I think it's very admirable.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, this issue you've raised almost brings me to tears because many people may not know that she's been paralyzed these past 20 years. She's confined in a wheelchair now as a disabled person. She was struck down by multiple sclerosis, MS. And, but like you are saying, she didn't resort to self-pity. She established an NGO called Share Care Ghana to advocate for autoimmune disease sufferers. You know, in Ghana, our medical delivery system is just geared towards the known malaria, HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, etc. But there are major non-communicable diseases that are also causing havoc in the system. So she has set up an NGO, and she's been struggling to get it going. And I must say, she's doing very, very well. She hasn't sat down in a wheelchair to cry and whine. So every morning she's wheeled to their office in Adabraka to continue with the advocacy for autoimmunity. And I tell you, autoimmunity is causing havoc. You may see a lot of blind people, you don't know that it is autoimmunity. You may see physically challenged people, autoimmunity. You may even see people with some skin problems. Autoimmunity is a very, very important thing which our medical people should start showing more of an interest in. But you are right. Thank you. I'll pass on your...
I would even love to interview her.
I think she would. If she was here, actually, the two of us would have done it if she was here. But like I said, she's gone to their office in Adabraka to continue with her advocacy work. I remember as young people in a miniskirt dancing the night away at Bam Tavern, and that today she's restricted to a wheelchair. It's
a lesson for all of us.
For all of us.
It's a lesson for all of us. In 2 minutes, what's the next chapter for Haruna? Because I know you're not finished yet.
It's difficult. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe after this interview, people will call me and give me offers to do something, and I'll consider. But actually, I'm writing. I'm trying to put together a lot of these things, especially my diplomatic experience. I've done 12 chapters, but I'm still suffering from what they call the writer's block or something. So I've just pushed it aside. But hopefully, pretty soon I should get it out.
No, it's important. We need to open our eyes to that. That's one thing we have really closed our eyes to, considering the amount of funds we channel to that direction. And most importantly, the amount of human resource we have there.
Absolutely.
You know, we can't just leave it as a formality.
Yes, and knowledge and experience.
We need to tap into it.
We need to tap into it.
But as I promised in the beginning of the interview, there's never going to be enough time for this one. I knew it. You know, my heart was breaking. I knew it. But I did my best. But who knows? Maybe one day we'll come back and just talk about just the diplomatic aspect of his life. Just take one aspect and deal with it so that I won't be jumping in and out. But hopefully I'll come back and talk to Mrs. Haruna Attah, also share experiences on autoimmunity and how we can all be aware of it. That's also another story. But I always give you this number. It's 024-366-2001. 024-366-2001. That's Tante's Fashions. They make my shirts for the show. So give them a call and get yourself a nice shirt. But until I come to you with another personality, I have enjoyed this one just as much as you did. Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Nana, thank you very much. May that say.